Delighted to have Liam Halligan with me, GBNews economics and business editor, because he can explain the detail, he can go through the facts. I want to start by asking you, Liam, can you explain the Laffer curve and how that works and whether that should be in the Chancellor's thinking tomorrow?
Well, the Laffer curve is one of the most basic theories in economics. It was famously sketched out on the back of a napkin by Art Laffer, the economist who invented it. And it sounds counterintuitive, but just bear with me. What it says is if you lower the rate of tax, then you'll get more tax revenue in, because a lower rate of tax encourages more economic activity and more economic growth. And that's exactly what we've seen with corporation tax over recent years. George Osborne from 2010 effectively lowered the headline rate of corporation tax from 30% all the way down to 19%. During that period, we didn't end up with less revenue from corporation tax. We ended up with more, not just in terms of more pounds and pence, but more also as a share of our GDP. And my concern is if we do go ahead tomorrow with this big increase in corporation tax from 19 to 25%, it will actually cost the Treasury money, because it will kill off some companies, it will dent growth incentives and lead to less revenue.
But don't some people argue in return that the economy was growing, it was getting back to a normal level after the 2008 crisis, and that this would have happened, but we'd have had even more money if the 25p rate had been in existence rather than 19p rate?
I think that's an argument, that's a counterfactual. But look, during that period from 2010 to now, when corporation tax has fallen from 30% to 19%, the UK, despite all the uncertainties of Brexit and all the knocking copy that many of our newspapers and broadcasters publish about this country, we were still the #1 destination in Europe in terms of attracting inward investment. It's really, really important that we keep a sign up saying that Britain is open for business. Look, we've dodged recession so far. The Bank of England and the OBR both said we would be in recession by now. We're not. But those green shoots, they're fragile, they're precious, and they mustn't be trampled on. The danger is now that if we hike corporation tax in the budget tomorrow, then many, many companies will be discouraged to the point that some close. We've just spent billions of pounds keeping companies going during lockdown. And corporation tax, the name, gives the impression of big businesses and massive multinationals. If you run a small plumbing company, you pay corporation tax. Corporation tax affects pretty much all businesses whose turnover is above £50,000. So this is a really bad disincentive to raise corporation tax. I think it will lead to lower growth and less revenue.
So it's not just about international investment coming into this country, it's actually about hitting small and medium-sized businesses that are the lifeblood of the economy and indeed of employment.
I recently featured on GBNews an incredible company, Jacob, in Sutton Coldfield, Andrew Mitchell's constituency, your parliamentary colleague, just south of Birmingham there. It's a factory that was established to create the rivets and screws and nails, literally to build Spitfires in our darkest hour. And it's still going. It's called Clevedon Fasteners. And the CEO of Clevedon Fasteners told me if corporation tax goes up, it will seriously threaten his business. You're taking 6% off the margin of a company. And for many companies, that is their entire margin. This would not only be a huge rise in corporation tax from 19 to 25%, Jacob, it would be the first rise in corporation tax in this country for 50 years. Is this really the time to do it when we're trying to recover from lockdown and the aftermath of this war in Ukraine?
And how much of the blame for this do you think it's fair to put on the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, and the forecasts it makes? You're an economic forecaster. Economic forecasters are never right. I mean, it's more of an art than a science. But the OBR has this particular authority. Do you think they are as guilty as I think they are?
Economic forecasting is always very, very difficult, particularly when it's 4 or 5 years ahead. And yet the OBR forecasts, they are presented by the press as if they are holy writ, as if forecasts were destiny, and they box politicians in to only be able to do certain things. Look, we need some kind of discipline here. We can't have, with all respect, politicians promising the world, because we'd end up with huge inflation and completely unmanageable government debt. But at the same time, there has to be some scope for judicious, risk-taking, instinctive economic policy making, rather than having the kind of false discipline of forecasts which turn out to be untrue. Your numbers before were completely correct, Jacob. The OBR misforecast, as in under-forecast, corporation tax receipts last year by £30 billion, and total receipts were only around £64 billion. That's a huge percentage miss. And that was the forecast at the beginning of the tax year for the tax year that followed. That wasn't a 4 or 5 year forecast. Forecasting is very, very difficult. I'm not saying it isn't. I did a lot of it myself when I was a young academic. But I don't think these forecasts should be presented, particularly by the press, as holy writ. They're not.
And on the global minimum tax, if we're going ahead with it, will other countries do the same?
Well, this is really a story that hasn't been told. I think it's a very important story, and I'm glad that elected politicians like you are highlighting it. This is the under-taxed payments rule put forward by the OECD. It's a Paris-based think tank. Members are the 28 leading industrialised countries, including the UK, of course. And they've put this rule forward, and the UK government has signed up to it. And it basically says we can't have a corporation tax that's less than 15%. And one day we might want a corporation tax that's less than 15%. The Republic of Ireland, a country I know very well, has very successfully had a 12.5% rate of corporation tax for a long time, and it's attracted lots of inward investment. But you know what? I don't think this rule is ever going to happen, because the United States is now starting to get upset. I've got a letter here, if I may just quote from it.
Well, I think we're unfortunately running out of time. But give us a taster of it.
Very briefly, this is from the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in Congress. He says this UTPR surtax proposed by the OECD is fundamentally flawed. House Republicans will not tolerate such a tax. We will aggressively pursue tax and trade countermeasures to protect American jobs, sovereignty and tax revenues. And I say, for one, the UK should do the same.